It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So my friends, you ever go to a museum or an art gallery and you see all these wonderful pictures and sculptures and paintings, and you just admire them and you wonder and you look, and sometimes you look at a picture and you just wonder what the artist or the painter meant, but when they wrote that or painted that particular painting, particularly if you write a book or if you read a book, if it's a mystery, if it's a comedy, if it's a drama. But when it's a real life story, you wonder what possessed the writer to do what they do. I'll give you one example of how things can be interpreted. I think I've told this story before of George Bernard Shaw when he premiered My Fair Lady. If you recall, after the premiere, he is having a reception, and this lady comes running through the crowd. He said, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Shaw. He said, yes. He says, I know exactly what you meant when you wrote this play. He said, what did I mean? And she proceeded to tell him what he meant. And he said something very interesting. He says, if that's what you got in my play, that's what I meant. So what does that bring us to our guest today? She was on the show before. Maya McGlynn wrote a number of books. Let's talk about you, your background, and then what inspired you to write these particular books.
Well, I've always enjoyed kids. I'm a mom, first and foremost. That was the one role I always knew I wanted. So once I got to be that, you would think I would have done this a long time ago, being that my youngest child is 12, and the books that I write are for, ages like 2 to 6 in that arena. But yeah, I've always enjoyed kids. I was a foster sibling growing up to a lot of kids. My first job was working with kids at a daycare environment. So it just always was something that kind of danced around that creative, flow and the imagination that little kids have. And so I guess that carried on with me through adulthood. And then I found myself working in creative outlets. I got my degree in graphic design. I went on to do photography. And then in different roles, I found myself doing, marketing and things like that. And, the things that I was working in around heavy equipment brought stories to mind.
Okay, so let's talk about when you wrote your first book, okay? When you give a girl a hammer. Now, what has inspired you to write this book? Now, when you say children's books, yes, but as an adult, looking at the book and reading, the current book, Lou Can Too, and the other one we showed, the Bigger Diggers, okay? There's a story in these books. So let's talk about when you give a girl a hammer, what's this book about? And what inspired you to write it?
That's something. I come from a line of empowered women. And so I was hearing stories about how my younger sister, she's 10 years younger than me, she has 2 daughters, and at the time they were working on a renovation project of a home. And that's where that story really stemmed from, because her daughters were then witnessing her do things that we witnessed our mom doing when we were growing up. And it just made me think, how cool is it that as a little girl, we can put these tools, whether that be a hammer, whether it be a microphone, whether it be a crayon, any of those things, you give the girl the tool and a little bit of time to play and learn, and she can exponentially improve and create using that. And I just thought it's an empowering story for girls to know that they can do anything.
So you're breaking this book down as if you give a girl a pen and a spatula, they'll make a breakfast. If you give them a crayon, they will paint a picture, okay? Mm-hmm. So if you're reading this to your child, what are you trying to convey?
Trying to let them know that you believe in them and that you know that they can do anything that they set their mind to. So I think it starts that conversation. It's a nice, short, to the point kind of story. It goes by quickly. And it just gives them enough, it's relatable. Little girls do pick up crayons and start to learn things. They do watch people in the kitchen and want to learn how to use utensils. So it's relatable for them. It can create a conversation around that empowerment.
All right, so then you got another book here. When you give a mom a minute,
yeah.
Okay? That's now. What was the incentive in writing this particular book?
So that one's really dear to my heart. I mean, they're all really dear to my heart because it always comes from a place that's within me. But that one, as a business owner and a mom, someone who's, worked full-time plus while parenting, it's a huge juggle. And that story was basically about that, about the fact that we are really busy, and it's not to take away from dads. I mean, it's parents across the board, and I do get teased. I do need to make a book about dads too. I think I'm going to have to do that at some point. But in this case, I was around other females like me who are entrepreneurs and moms, and I was watching them juggle and become successful in what they were doing. And it's such a balance. And as a mom, you often can doubt whether or not your kids know you love them, like just how much, that's coming across. So that story is really about creating that bridge for a mom reading to her child and the child receiving this story, recognizing, oh yeah, my mom does this and this and this, and she always looks busy. But by the end of that book, what it's relating it to is the fact that while mom's busy and it looks like it's easy and she's not thinking, she's always thinking about you. The things that she's doing are for you that you don't always recognize.
So in today's society, okay, and I've seen this throughout the years of doing my shows, where the family seems to be dissipating, where the gatherings of family, and how the media tries to not make the family as important as it should be, okay? How do you feel about families today and uniting them to work together, to be together, to share? I don't know when you grew up, and every night we sat at the dinner table and you had that relationship. Today, who's on the texts, who's, having fast foods, etc. With all due respect, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think what we're living in, it is really challenging. We have an economy that really does require a lot of times that, both parents work. It's difficult. Social media makes a whole new level of challenges for when you're raising kids and stuff. I don't think there is perfection. I think it's really tough to be able to, sometimes dinner is a moving target. That's, kids' sports, that's parents' work schedules, it's all the extracurriculars, and when you have multiple kids. So I think that there's so many moving parts. It really is challenging as a parent and an employer or employee to juggle it all. And I think we're all just doing the best we can.
Are we? See, that's the question I have. Are we? Now, you mentioned about, children, sports, etc. My grandmother had 13 children. So there's a lot of families in our area that have 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 kids. All of them were in line, and she made sure that, they all did what had to do as raising those kids, because she lost her husband at an early age. What I think sometimes happens as I read your books is that parents sometimes, mom wants to become a friend instead of a mother. And I don't think you should, my opinion is they're not my friends, they're my children. And sometimes you have to do things in developing. So when I'm reading your books and I'm saying, well, how does this associate with the person who's reading it, and what lessons can be learned from that, which I think are very interesting, particularly, when you did the diggers, and how that worked and what it meant. Now, you brought something up that I think was interesting. You said, I was reading before, that you had, when you wrote something, there were, the particular book now that Lou can too, you said that there were rude, crude comments and about your stance on electric. To share that with me.
So it wasn't particularly my stance, but working in a marketing capacity, electric equipment is something that is very new on the scene, and at the time, extremely new. So as that was being, built up to start showing people, a campaign was out, I was watching the adults interact on social media, and I just found that people will very easily, keyboard warriors will very easily just be uneducated, unresearched, and, we're rigid when it comes to change. So you form an opinion, and you think, well, this just doesn't work, and here's why I think that, and then you're committed to that, and you're not really willing to bend. And I just thought that for me carried over into life. Like, how often do we find ourselves in these scenarios where just because something changes, people become so closed off and judgmental? And I thought, well, I don't want kids to see the world that way.
How would you like to see them? How would you like to have kids see the world?
I would prefer that they approach things from a stance of curiosity, from asking questions. I feel like that's how we learn. And we have to recognize that it is inevitable, that change is going to come, right? That's life. You can't avoid it. Doesn't mean it's always going to be right. It doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect across the board, but it's going to happen. And so the best way to approach it is to question it, to try to learn more, and to figure out, well, where does this fit? Where doesn't it fit? And so where electric was concerned, that's what was striking to me, because I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm not particularly pushing a narrative per se, you know, maybe I'm still forming my opinion, but I'm not about to sit here and make it ugly across the board. I think that there is a place for each thing. And I have kind of an open-minded approach, an objective outlook for that, to say, okay, well, where does this fit? Where doesn't it fit? How are they creating it? What's happening from there? You know, you ask the questions, you do the legwork and see before you just start throwing out assumptions.
Today, kids are under a lot of peer pressure. I mean, what we teach them in the home, and they leave and they go to school or whether they go, they're not surrounded with parents, they're surrounded with their own peers. And sometimes they're very impressionable as to what they see, what they read, and what they hear. All right? And that's where the fact is that when you have your family gatherings, that's where you learn, well, what did you learn today? Well, Mary told me this today, or Jimmy said this. So you're able to communicate. How do you keep those lines of communication open in today's society?
So while you're talking, like it used to be around the dinner table, everybody would talk about that. Now I think a lot of that personally, and I think a lot of people can relate, we're having those conversations in the car. You know, we're on our way to and fro to a lot of
Excellent,
things.
good, yes.
And we're having those talks,
Yes,
you know.
beautiful.
Right after school, if you have the opportunity. It's like, okay, well, what was today like? Now, I have, you know, 2 boys too, and boys don't always have a lot of words. So a lot of times it's just one-word answers, but at least we try.
Yeah, at least you open it up.
Yeah, but I think that it is important, just even on a, you know, one parent, one child conversation, like everybody's kind of keeping their thumb on the pulse and interacting.
Yeah. Folks, I'm talking to Maya McGlynn, who wrote a number of books. This book I read, but I found interesting things here, and then I realized what she meant in writing this and what I got out of the book. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember 24/7, ssptv.com. You're going to see all of the neighborhood shows we produce. Amazing how many shows we produce. All of them are there. And click the thing on our website, About Us. There's the report from the Susquehanna Polling and Research, which was a scientific poll indicating the number of people that are watching our local shows. We appreciate that, and most especially thanks for making this show, the Sam Lesante Show, the #1 talk show in northeastern Pennsylvania. I really appreciate that. Today I have an author who wrote a number of books, quite interesting, Mia McGlynn, and she's a Pennsylvania-based writer and photographer. Mia calls on her years of experience in childcare and the creative arts to develop stories inspired by real people and real experiences. When you put this first book together, which we talked about, Bigger Diggers, what was the story about this little machine guy, this guy here?
He was kind of the underdog on a job site where the machines around him were all super big and capable and self-confident, and he didn't know his place.
Okay, so this happened to have in your real life. You've seen this happen.
It was inspired by a photo project I was working on because
Okay.
I got to take pictures of when Volvo was releasing the R100E. And it's the biggest rigid haul truck that they had out. And it was just ginormous. And when I took that picture and when I was there, I was just in awe of this thing. And I immediately saw a character in it. And so I created Harry Haul Truck from that. And then from there I was like, well, Harry Haul Truck has to have counterparts, so I had Vars the Crawler, who matched up with Harry nicely, and they worked together on, moving the earth, and it was great. Well, then of course, to make that story, I realized like Lou is sitting on the sidelines because there are all different sizes machines. So I created Lou because he was a little guy, and I thought, little guys are useful on the job site too.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing here when you had this little guy seeing all these big things, and where did he fit in? Until one of the big guys got stuck in the mud, got stuck. Here comes Lou, and because of his weight or whatever, he was able to go there, help this big truck out, okay? So there is a purpose. What I got from this book, there is a purpose for everybody. We just have to realize what our purpose is. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely, yep.
So then comes his second book, okay? Now this is where Lou was around, and he goes to the country and he sees some other people here. It's fascinating. These are really fascinating. When you look at them, you think, well, they're cartoon books again, but they're really, really good books, okay? So the Lou Can Too. At the end, it says, well, it's a good book, okay? I don't want to ruin the book. But what was the inspiration here?
So Lou really was kind of a fan favorite from Bigger Diggers, and I knew immediately when I finished that book that there was going to be more adventure for him. And I just didn't know exactly what, and that just kind of came to me over time. What I realized was Lou being small was one way that he was different in that scenario. So I thought, well, what if we put him into a different scenario, but I also still want to be able to cultivate that conversation about being different, and that being a strength as opposed to a weakness. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna send him out into, a little farm forest environment, and the machines are gonna be more his size. So we brought in, 2 more machines, and it was really important to me to bring a girl into that. So there is a girl mini excavator, kind of like Lou.
Yeah.
And her name is Sloan. And she has her little pink bandana that she wears, and she's a happy-go-lucky kind of character, and their other buddy Duncan is kind of a rodeo cowboy style skid steer, and also very happy-go-lucky. But they approach Lou from a sense of curiosity when they realize like he's electric, they operate on fuel. So there's another difference, and they're wondering, well, why are you here? And they get to go through the story with him and realize this is his purpose. This is why he's here. This is where he fits great that maybe we can't.
Now, the interesting thing is, there's a lot of interesting things. First, how do you get all these names? Where do you get the names from?
I just picked them.
Sloan and Duncan. Where do you get all these names? How do you get with Lou? How did Lou come? And just popped in your mind? Yeah.
I like names.
I'm waiting for a Sam.
Okay.
I'm waiting for a Sam, and he better be a good character in the books. When you're first of all, how do we get some of these? How do we get your books?
So they're available, all of them are on Amazon, and they're also available through me on my website. It's mcglynnmedia.com.
This, I find, when you're sitting down, a parent reading it to their child, or, whoever they're taking care of, I could see this at grade schools or places where kids are gathered and you're reading the story, and looking at them, it becomes very interesting, because the kids can relate to that, I think these 2 books here I really enjoyed, I enjoyed the way you put them together, So when you look today, you said, you wonder why people are so vicious sometimes, and believe me, I could write the book on that, over doing 6,000 shows. I got from who the hell does he think he is, and he come from Partysville, he's just a blah, 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 blah. I had all of these things, but you know what I had? I had my faith, and I had strong parents, and I had a strong family. And I think that, if kids sometimes are not as aggressive, they should realize that they are important. No matter who they are important. And everybody does have something to contribute. I may not agree, but that doesn't mean I should not like that person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you find that in your travels and in your...
Oh, absolutely. Even when it comes to, what you were asking about, the family unit and being able to really get in there with the kids and find out what's going on in their lives and stuff, and how do you how do you teach them different things that you think are right and wrong? And I think one of the biggest things as parents that we can do is convey a sense of self-esteem and self-confidence in our children, because that will help them make good decisions under peer pressure. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to have a better self-value if we're really instilling that. And I try to do that with my books. I try to approach it from kind of a mental health awareness standpoint. You know, I want to cultivate kindness, openness, curiosity, empowerment, those sorts of things from the time they're little, so that it's not when they're our age having to backtrack and fix all the things that we didn't pay attention to, you know?
Yeah. Speaking of big trucks, you hear a truck out there now backing up. Okay, you arranged that way.
I did.
You had a big truck backing up. Okay. The interesting thing about when you're looking at training your children to do the right things, okay, it is a very busy society today. Both parents have to work just to provide a living and plus education and whole stuff like that. What do you say to parents out there in terms of giving them the proper guidance?
Giving kids the proper guidance?
Yeah.
I really do. I think your kids just need to know that you love them, and it has to be met with, you know, you may not be able to be at every single thing for them, and no, we don't all sit around the table together at the same time, but that doesn't mean that you can't still be there for them as a parent, and they still need to know that you are interested. And it does take a village, I get that. I think it's important for us to not guilt ourselves. We have to give grace on both accounts.
You know what I think lacks in a lot of parents, especially older parents, okay, they do love their children, but they never tell them.
Yeah.
They never tell them.
I think it goes without saying.
Yeah, well, but I remember, you know, my wife said to me one day, she said, "Honey, do you love me?" I said, "Of course I love you." "Why did you tell me?" See? So how many times do we tell our children, "I love you," as a parent, okay, or a dear friend, "I love you," in the nicest sense of the word. We don't say those things in it. Well, you know I love you. No. Well, did you tell me that you love me? And so these are some lessons you find. That's what I like about art when I interview an author or a painter or whatever who paints great pictures. It's the way they think, you know, etc. Mia McGlynn, McGlynnmedia.com. Go to Amazon, plug her name in. The books are really, really interesting, okay? And they come alive after you read them and you know what is meant with these books. I really enjoy them. I really do.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm so glad. I'm also doing events and stuff. I'm booking for next school year. So that's something that I go and do author events.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, it's fun because the kids get to interact with me. I can sign their books for them and things like that.
Yes,
so.
If you want Mia, go to her website. It's right there, and they could get in touch with you by going to your website, right? Thanks for joining us, my friends. Hope you learned something today. Be kind. We'll see you next time.